So oddly here, Brew, it's a bad game for the 49ers, but you take a W, I guess? Okay.
They're not my team this year. My team is Green Bay. J-Lo. No, they didn't miss Brock Purdy at all,
did this
did they?
Purdy's value?
They didn't. Look, Greg Jennings said it well. I mean, Lombardi wrote it well. Greg Jennings said it well last week. He said these games they've lost, they wouldn't even be in many of them if it wasn't for Purdy. In fact, 3 of them they had won, and the defense gave it up. But yesterday, now their 5 losses this season are by a combined 23 points. The biggest one was 10 points to the Chiefs, right? Yesterday, they lost by 28. So they lost 1 game without Brock Purdy by more than the 5 they had lost with him. His biggest loss of his career as a starter is 14 points. So all of a sudden they get blown out. They couldn't do anything yesterday. They had pre-snap penalties, obviously penalties galore in general, but a lot of them were pre-snap. For some reason, they couldn't tackle. That's not related to Brock Purdy, but still, the tackling was horrible. But they had 5 fumbles. 5 fumbles. The Avengers, we got to retire the Avengers when it comes to the Niners. We can do them with your new team, the Eagles. They got Avengers. Debo, 1 catch, 21 yards. Dropped the pass that led to the interception by Xavier McKinney. Debo was a great player a few years ago. I still think he has greatness in him, but hasn't been great in a little while. Christian McCaffrey, I just think the injury and maybe the age, but I thought he was bad with Purdy the last few games, averaging 3.7 yards a carry. Yesterday, he averaged 2.8 yards a carry.
And the whole team.
And then Juwan Jennings, who I think you called an Avenger too, didn't you?
No, I never called him an Avenger.
They clearly missed Brock Purdy.
So, and the whole team missed Trent Williams, the best player on the team, and maybe one of the best left tackles ever. But I knew this is what would happen. So this is why, Coach, you weren't here Friday.
You knew they were going to get blown out.
No. I knew this would be, and this is a perfect encapsulation of my frustration. On Friday, I went a little rogue, Coach, and Wilds asks the questions, and we had a Niners topic, and then I threw one out there. And I said, hey, just out of curiosity, if the Niners play well, if they win, what will it prove? Yeah. And Bruce said, call on me, teacher, and said absolutely nothing. Hold on, Brew.
I just threw it out.
I did. Because I was very curious because I anticipated this is what it would be. And I wanted everyone to be on the record. That side of the table said if the Niners win, it proves nothing. But if the Niners get blown out, it of course proves Purdy's value, which to me strikes a bit of a double standard. To me, both would have been super relevant. And this is relevant because now we know definitively, if there was any question, Brock Purdy is better than Brandon Allen. I don't think, listen, I will put him in the same bucket.
You were talking like you didn't know on Friday.
No, I was not. I was asking the question of if the Niners offense hummed, what it would mean. But Brandon Allen's in the same bucket as Brew's favorite, CJ, Brian Hoyer, and Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard, not CJ Stroud, of quarterbacks that can't even run this quarterback-proof offense. I thought Trey Lance actually ran it well.
It's clearly not quarterback-proof. You just named 4 quarterbacks.
Right, because they're not starters. They're not starters in this league. And so I just had a feeling this is how it would go. Would be if the Niners somehow had won and played well, it would mean nothing, like Jake Browning.
Right.
But because they struggled without their starting quarterback, without their starting left tackle, without their best defensive player, it speaks to his value. It just seems like it's always Calvin ball with the Purdy discussion, and that's frustrating.
And I think this would have been a totally different discussion if the defense had played anywhere near close to well. So they couldn't tackle anybody. They gave up a 100-yard rusher for the first time in the regular season in 55 games. So that hadn't happened since that streak was like since 1955, one of the longest or the longest streak. So they couldn't tackle, they couldn't play defense, they couldn't stay onside, they had 9 penalties. Collectively, they laid an egg. So it's hard to say this was Purdy. This would have been a lot more compelling if the defense had played well and the offense had played that poorly. But collectively, the whole team laid an egg.
And I'm not saying this is like some huge statement. What I'm just pointing out the facts that they fell apart.
Does anyone think the 49ers are going to the playoffs?
I do.
No.
You do?
Are going?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm worried.
Coach is worried about everybody today.
Look, I made a mistake. I have to take full accountability.
I feel so
for
sick
doing
for a coach
something
on this.
so uncharacteristic.
You did.
And choosing a second-year quarterback And sitting next to Nick for all these years, I think has unfortunately wore me down enough to jump on the bandwagon way too early, especially at the quarterback position.
MVP,
And-
Super Bowl, whole thing.
Yeah, it's way too much.
Did the whole thing.
Way too much. And I imagine what CJ's going through right now is he had all the success last year. He comes in with the expectations. And then when you have those expectations, you get to that point where you start pressing, a little bit like Jalen Hurts after he got his contract. And when you're pressing, nothing good ever comes from that. And I think that the most important thing he can do is, instead of keep digging, take a little bit of a step back, try to do maybe do a little bit less instead of trying to constantly doing more, which is only leading to more mistakes and less productivity.
So he's obviously having a down year. Are you now questioning whether he'll be like a star,
No.
for his career?
No, I think what happens is you have that success, you come out of the blue and have it, and then everybody studies you, everybody figures out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and you've got to do all the same things you did the year before, better than you did, and then you've also got to develop your weaknesses, because your weaknesses are on tape and everybody's giving you huge doses of what you do poorly.
Here's, Nick, this is what I thought, because I understand that CJ seemed really hard on himself, and I don't think he wants to say this, but so I'll say it. Highest pressure percentage faced this season. Will Levis is number 1, CJ number 2, Deshaun, and Drake May. Oh, my goodness. Shout out to Drake May, having a great year.
Yeah,
so for me, this is just it. I don't see a sophomore slump. I
Here's
see the guy
line
who's
wasn't
not-
great.
That's
year,
the
though.
problem.
Yeah.
The problem is last year the offensive line might have been more banged up.
And it was all types of
This year it's marginally
rotations.
worse, but last year it was a problem, and he was great. The other problem is this. It's Nico Collins is now back. And if we can show first 6 versus last 6, it's not like the offensive line got way worse. You know what I mean? In mid-October, his last 6 games, he's been brutal. And I don't know how closely people were watching Texans-Titans, but I had the Titans +8 and Nick's picks, another winning week in America. This was a game that no one loses. When you're the opening kickoff, the Texans went 80 yards, scored a touchdown on the next play. So they basically got a kick return touchdown. Levis went, as Brew texted, full Levis on a pick 6, and the Titans muffed a punt to give the Texans a super short field, 17 free points. Now I understand Fairbairn missed a 26-yarder, which was absurd, but this was a worse loss than the score indicates. And so I think that we are in a situation where, of the 14 teams that make the playoffs, the Texans are going to be the easiest out. They're not going to not win that division. And we were talking about who's going
NFC South could be an easy out.
Maybe.
Unless
I
it's
mean,
Tampa would be an
Tampa.
if they get there.
Defensively, don't forget though, they are number 1 in takeaways and they are number 2 in sacks. So you can still you can still go a long way if the defense.
The sacks, I believe in being more sustainable over the course of the year than the takeaways. That almost concerns me because it feels like that can regress to the mean a bit.
Saquon MVP.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.